Last year, there was this highly decorated chief information security officer who actually found themselves facing federal
Oh,
charges.
yeah, that was a huge deal in the industry.
Right. And it wasn't because they maliciously hacked a system or stole company funds or anything like that. It was because they fundamentally misunderstood their legal duty to the public during a catastrophic data breach.
Exactly. They approached it like an engineer.
Yeah, they tried to fix this massive technical problem quietly, acting like a mechanic, just trying to keep the engine running, when the law actually required them to act like a corporate officer protecting society. So today, we are taking the wrench out of your hand and putting you straight into the executive chair.
And honestly, that shift from being a tactical fixer to a strategic business leader, it is arguably the single highest hurdle for technical professionals.
It really is a whole different world.
It requires a completely different professional identity. I mean, you spend your entire career being rewarded for finding the broken valve and patching it.
No, absolutely. That's how you get promoted.
Right. But then suddenly you're told to stop touching the valves entirely. You have to start managing the budget for the whole racing team, ensuring the driver stays alive and guaranteeing the sponsors don't pull their funding. It's a profound and, frankly, a deeply uncomfortable psychological transition.
It sounds terrifying, honestly. But welcome to this deep dive. Our mission today is to equip you, yes, you listening right now, with that ultimate management mindset.
We have a lot of ground to cover.
We really do. We've synthesized this massive stack of knowledge covering organizational governance, personnel security, risk management math, and, the high-level psychological strategies you need to navigate these really complex security scenarios.
It's basically a masterclass in executive thinking.
Yeah, so whether you are actively preparing for a grueling 3-hour management certification exam, like the CISSP, or you're just a seasoned tech professional looking to survive the corporate boardroom, this conversation is designed to totally rewire how you process risk.
We have to move away from asking, how do I configure this firewall, to demanding, how does this investment actually protect the overall business mission?
And that distinction right there is everything.
It really is. If you're sitting for a premier management exam in this field, or even just stepping into a C-suite presentation, you are entering a very specific, unforgiving environment.
So unforgiving.
The mechanics of how you're tested and how boards evaluate you actually dictate how you need to think. So let's look at the premier certification exams first. You're typically looking at, a 3-hour window to answer between 100 to 150 questions.
And the engine actually adapts to the test taker,
Yeah.
right? Which honestly sounds a bit like psychological warfare to me.
Oh, it absolutely is. It's a computer adaptive test, or a SEAT. This means the difficulty of your next question is entirely dependent on how you answered the previous one.
Wait, so the test is actually judging you in real time?
Yeah, the algorithm is constantly probing for your weaknesses. You could literally pass or fail in the first 100 questions. If the test engine determines with enough statistical confidence that you've mastered the material, or that you absolutely have not, the screen simply shuts off at 100.
Wow. Meaning if you are staring at question 101, you are still in the fight.
Exactly. The computer hasn't made up its mind yet. You're hovering somewhere on the razor's edge between passing and failing.
That has to be so stressful. And you can't just, focus on the stuff you're good at, right?
You cannot game the system by only studying the domains you enjoy. The material is ruthlessly balanced. Every single domain, from risk management nuances to software security architecture, it all comprises roughly 10 to 16% of your total score.
So you have to be a generalist.
You do, but there's a massive structural proclivity in these exams that absolutely devastates brilliant engineers.
What's that?
You cannot skip a question and go back.
Oh, man. That goes against every test-taking instinct we are taught in grade school. Usually you skip the hard ones, build some momentum on the easy ones, and come back when your brain has, warmed up.
Right, but the adaptive engine doesn't allow for that because it actually needs your current answer to generate the next prompt. You must commit to a decision and move forward.
That must require so much discipline.
Immense psychological discipline. I mean, you
Yeah.
cannot let the ghost of question 42 haunt you while you're trying to solve question 43.
Okay, let's unpack this. If the architecture of the exam is that rigid, your tactical approach to simply reading the screen has to be flawless. How do you even tackle a complex paragraph-long scenario when you know you can never look at it again once you click next?
Well, the most effective strategy, and this applies just as much to reading a frantic email from your CEO as it does to an exam, is to read the scenario entirely without looking at the potential answers first.
Really? Don't even glance at them.
Don't even glance. Physically cover the multiple choice options with your hand if you need to. Just read the scenario and build the perfect real-world management solution in your mind. Establish your own baseline before the test tries to manipulate you with its carefully crafted distractors.
Oh, I see. Because if you read the answers first, they kind of plant a seed in your head. You start trying to justify their options instead of trusting your own expertise.
Exactly. You get anchored to their suggestions.
Right.
Once you've formed that ideal management response, then you skim the scenario a second time, specifically hunting for critical modifiers.
Modifiers like what?
Words like most important, best option, first step, or primary reason, usually they're capitalized. Those words can completely alter the context of the question.
I want to push back on that slightly, though, because in real-world incident response, things happen concurrently, right? If a critical database server goes down, I'm like isolating the network, pulling the logs, calling the business owner, and spinning up a backup all at the exact same time. The test kind of forces a false prioritization.
It does force a prioritization, yes, but it's a management prioritization. You're absolutely right that a technical team executes those tasks concurrently. But a manager has to decide which action dictates the overarching strategy.
Okay, that makes sense. So what if you just genuinely don't know the answer?
If you're stumped, you apply what we call the elimination strategy. You look at the fundamental language of the options.
Like matching nouns to noun.
Exactly. If a question asks you to identify a specific technology to mitigate a threat, and two of the options are processes like drafting a new acceptable use policy or initiating a quarterly audit, you can cross those out immediately. They don't match the noun type requested in the prompt.
That is a very mechanical way to clear the board.
Yeah.
Just match the category of the answer to the category of the question.
Furthermore, you must aggressively avoid answers containing absolutes.
Absolutes, like always or never.
Yes. Words like always, never, guaranteed, or 100% secure. In the realm of business management and cybersecurity, there are virtually no absolutes.
Because things are constantly changing.
Right. Everything we do is about mitigating risk down to a level the business can tolerate. We never eliminate risk entirely. So if you're staring at 4 options and you're completely lost, look for the one answer that serves as an umbrella.
The bang for the buck philosophy. This is where the technical brain really clashes with the executive brain, isn't it?
It is the core tension of the entire profession. If you were spending your own money and your own time, which single option provides the absolute most value to the organization?
And techs usually pick the coolest toy.
Exactly. Technical professionals have a dangerous tendency to choose the most expensive, most complex, most nerdy technical solution because it is, objectively, the most secure. But a CISO looks at that same solution and realizes it costs more than the data is actually worth.
Let's contextualize that umbrella concept. So if a scenario asks for the best way to secure a new remote workforce, and option A is deploy a robust firewall, option B is mandate multi-factor authentication, but option C is implement a comprehensive defense-in-depth strategy.
Which one are you picking?
Option C wins, right? Because it naturally absorbs A and B. It's the management answer, whereas A and B are just technician answers.
That is the perfect illustration. You have to constantly ask yourself, am I answering this as the person typing on the keyboard or the person accountable for the risk? You have to actively reject the urge to touch the keyboard.
That's tough.
It is. And this ties directly into the 3 golden rules of security management. These rules are basically your North Star when a scenario is highly ambiguous.
Okay, let's anchor these rules for the listener. Rule number 1. Security exists to support the business mission, not hinder it.
Yes. We do not lock down a business so tightly that it cannot function, cannot innovate, and cannot generate revenue. Security is a business enabler.
Make the car go faster safely. Don't just take the wheels off.
Exactly.
Rule number 2. Strategic alignment earns senior leadership support and funding.
If your security roadmap doesn't perfectly map to where the CEO is taking the business in the next 5 years, you will be viewed as an obstacle. You will not get budget, and you will not get authority.
Makes sense. And rule number 3, which overrides absolutely everything else we will discuss today, saving human life is always the first priority.
Full stop. No exceptions. If a scenario involves a physical disaster, a fire in the server room, or a chemical spill, the answer is never secure the data or grab the backup tapes.
The answer is always get the people out.
Always. Sounding the alarm, triggering the emergency lights, evacuating personnel. Human safety supersedes all data, all hardware, and all policies.
Which naturally leads us to the ethical frameworks that govern this entire profession. Because once you step out of that server room and start making decisions that affect human lives, corporate survival, and public trust, you're no longer just playing by technical rules. You are bound by a strict code of ethics.
And in this industry, what is right and wrong is not left up to your personal philosophical interpretation. It is strictly codified.
You can't just go with your gut.
No, you can't. If you're a certified professional, particularly under ISC, you are bound by their code of professional ethics. The most critical nuance to understand about this code, both for exams and real-world application, is that it's comprised of 4 canons, and they must be applied in a strict, unyielding order of importance.
Strict order, meaning Canon 1 always, unequivocally beats Canon 2.
Always. You resolve ethical dilemmas by starting at the very top. Canon 1 is the overarching mandate. Protect society, the common good, necessary public trust and confidence, and the infrastructure.
So society first.
Yes. You must put the common good above yourself, above your team, and above your employer. It's such a fundamental duty that literally any member of the public can file a formal ethics claim against you if you violate it.
Let's test that. Let's say my employer, a massive energy company, experiences a breach that allows a threat actor to manipulate the safety valves on a public gas pipeline.
Okay, high stakes.
Yeah. And my CEO tells me to keep it quiet while we try to patch it, because going public would tank the stock price. Canon 1 says I have a duty to society first, right?
Right.
Because public safety is actively at risk.
In that scenario, Canon 1 absolutely demands action. You cannot prioritize the stock price over a potential explosion in a residential neighborhood. You must protect the infrastructure and the common good.
Okay, so assuming society isn't in immediate physical danger, we move to Canon 2. Act honorably, honestly, justly, responsibly, and legally, which fundamentally just means follow the law.
Yes, but the legal landscape in cyber is rarely simple.
True.
What happens if you are a consultant based in the United States, working on servers located in Germany for a client headquartered in Japan, and the laws of those 3 nations violently conflict?
Oh, wow. What do you even do then?
The established rule of thumb is to prioritize the local jurisdiction from which you are physically performing the services.
So if I'm typing on the keyboard in the U.S., I follow U.S. law.
Generally speaking, yes.
Okay, so society first, the law second. That brings us to Canon 3. Provide diligent and competent service to principals. Principals basically being the people who pay you, right?
Yeah.
Your employers, your clients, your board of directors.
Exactly. This canon dictates that you do a professional job, you continuously maintain your skills, and crucially, you avoid claiming expertise you do not actually possess.
Fake it till you make it doesn't fly here.
No, it doesn't. You do not sell yourself as an expert in artificial intelligence security if you've only read one blog post about it. Interestingly, only an employer or someone with a direct contractual relationship with you can file a complaint under this specific canon.
Oh, so the general public can't complain that I'm bad at my job, only my boss can.
Right.
And the final layer, Canon 4. Advance and protect the profession.
Don't act in a way that brings negative publicity or shame to the cybersecurity field. Mentor others, support the community. But the reality of Canon 4 is that it's just a natural byproduct of the first 3.
Meaning if you do the first 3, you're good.
Yeah, if you're protecting society, obeying the law, and serving your principals competently, you are automatically advancing the profession.
Let's throw a wrench into that strict order, though. Let's say your direct boss, your principal, comes to you and demands you do something explicitly illegal to cover up a financial discrepancy.
All right.
They're paying your salary. They're threatening to fire you if you don't comply.
This is the classic ethical stress test. Your boss is your principal, which triggers Canon 3. Provide diligent service to principals. However, they are demanding you break the law, which triggers Canon 2. Act legally.
And Canon 2 beats Canon 3.
Exactly. Because Canon 2 sits higher in the hierarchy than Canon 3, your obligation to the law completely supersedes your obligation to your employer. You must refuse the illegal order, regardless of the personal consequences to your career.
The hierarchy makes the decision mathematically clear, even if it is professionally terrifying to actually do. But there's a difference between these massive, career-ending ethical dilemmas and the everyday friction of organizational ethics, isn't there? Personal ethics versus organizational ethics can get incredibly messy.
They frequently collide. Personal ethics represent your internal moral compass. For example, your personal ethics might dictate that driving 105 kilometers an hour in a 100 zone on an empty highway is perfectly fine.
Right. You aren't hurting anyone. It's efficient. The risk is negligible.
Right. But organizational ethics are rigid, codified rules designed to protect the entire entity from systemic risk.
A perfect example is vendor gifting policies. Your company might have a strict organizational policy that you cannot accept any gifts from a supplier, period.
Yeah.
But personally, you know that accepting a $20 coffee mug from a vendor isn't going to bribe you into signing a $1 million contract.
Sure.
So your personal ethics say the mug is totally harmless?
But as a manager, your personal feelings about the coffee mug are irrelevant. You're obligated to evangelize and enforce the organizational ethics. The rule exists to protect the company from even the perception of impropriety during an audit.
You have to enforce the zero-gift policy to maintain the integrity of the procurement system.
Exactly. You can't make exceptions based on your gut feeling.
Which brings us to how we actually enforce all these rules, ethics, and priorities across massive corporations. We need to talk about governance. I know it's a heavy bureaucratic word, but it's really the engine that keeps everything aligned.
Governance is fundamentally about oversight, accountability, and direction. It's the mechanism that ensures the IT department is not simply grading its own homework.
Because nobody should grade their own homework.
Exactly. It's the formal framework that guarantees every dollar spent on security is actively advancing that executive business roadmap we talked about earlier.
And you achieve that oversight through committees, right? You don't let the chief information officer make all the decisions in a vacuum.
You utilize steering committees. They provide a mandatory sober second thought.
I love that phrase.
Yeah. So if the IT department proposes a $10 million initiative to migrate the entire infrastructure to a new bleeding-edge cloud provider, the business leaders on the governance committee review that proposal.
And they probably don't even look at the technical specs.
But they don't care about the specs. They are asking, does this actually help us manufacture our products faster? Does this open up new markets? Does this align with our strategic 5-year plan? Governance prevents technologists from buying shiny new toys simply because they're technically impressive.
To make governance work, you have to map out exactly who has the authority to make those decisions. You need organizational clarity, which is why the RFI model is universally tested and applied, RACI.
Responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. It is a matrix that eliminates ambiguity during any project or incident response.
Let's break those down.
Sure. Responsible refers to the person who actually has their hands on the keyboard. They execute the task. Accountable, on the other hand, is the person where the buck stops.
They may not do the physical work, right?
Exactly. But if the project fails, they are the ones answering to the board and potentially losing their job.
And the golden rule of the RCI model is that you can have multiple people who are responsible, but there can only ever be one person who is accountable. Because if 2 people are accountable, nobody is accountable.
Precisely. Now, consulted refers to subject matter experts you must engage before taking action, like ensuring you consult legal and HR before drafting a new employee monitoring policy.
Makes sense. And informed.
Informed simply means you notify them after the fact. The firewall upgrade was completed successfully.
The RCI model helps dismantle a massive misconception that technical people harbor, doesn't it? The idea that the IT department actually owns the company's systems and data? They don't, do they?
They absolutely do not. IT does not own the business. Let's break down the silos of ownership, because getting this wrong on an exam or in a boardroom will immediately disqualify you.
Wait, who's at the top?
At the apex, you have the CEO, who holds ultimate accountability for the survival of the entire organization. Beneath them, you have the system owner. This is always a business unit leader.
Let's use a tangible example.
Yeah.
Let's say the marketing department purchases a massive, complex customer relationship management, or CRM, software suite.
Yeah.
The chief marketing officer is the system owner.
Yes. Even if the IT department built the servers for it, even if IT manages the daily patching, and even if IT actively despises the software and considers it shadow IT, the CMO owns that system.
Why?
Because the system exists solely to generate marketing revenue. The CMO decides the acceptable level of risk for that system, and they decide if it continues to receive funding.
Okay, so parallel to the system owner, we have a highly nuanced role, the information owner. How does the information owner differ from the system owner?
The information owner is a senior executive who is legally accountable for a specific classification or type of data, regardless of where that data physically resides in the company.
Oh, I see.
For example, the chief financial officer is the information owner for all payment card data and financial records. That specific financial data might sit inside the marketing system, and it might sit inside the HR system.
But the CFO still owns it.
Yes, the CFO dictates the security baseline for that data across the entire enterprise.
So the CFO owns the financial data, the CMO owns the marketing server it temporarily sits on. Where does the poor IT department fit into this hierarchy?
The IT personnel are merely the custodians.
Custodians.
Yeah, they do not own the data, and they do not own the business process. Their role is to execute the technical tasks dictated by the system and information owners. They perform the backups, they configure the encryption, they manage the access control lists, but they do so strictly on behalf of the business leaders.
Now that we have established who owns the data and the ethical frameworks for protecting it, we need to explicitly define what protection actually means. For decades, the industry relied on the CIA triad, but the sources make it clear that the triad is just no longer sufficient for modern management. We are now dealing with the expanded 5 pillars of information security.
The classic 3 remain foundational, of course: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. We assume any professional at this level understands them implicitly.
Right, confidentiality prevents improper disclosure. Availability ensures reliable access when the business demands it.
But integrity requires a deeper look, because it's often misunderstood as just preventing unauthorized changes.
Integrity is really about the trustworthiness, accuracy, and precision of the data and the systems processing it. It's ensuring that when you pull a report, you can stake your career on the fact that the numbers haven't been maliciously altered or accidentally corrupted.
Consider a scenario where integrity completely overrides confidentiality.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine a hospital pharmacy that uses an automated compounding system to mix intravenous heart medication. If a threat actor steals the formula and publishes it online, that is a massive breach of confidentiality.
Yeah, it's embarrassing and might hurt the hospital's competitive advantage.
But nobody is physically harmed.
But if the threat actor doesn't steal the formula and instead subtly alters the compounding ratios in the database,
The wrong mixture goes into the IV bag and patients die. That is a catastrophic failure of integrity, and it instantly becomes a life safety issue. In environments dealing with physical machinery, medical devices, or aviation, integrity often eclipses confidentiality.
wow. Okay, so those are the core 3. But the landscape has evolved, necessitating 2 additional pillars: authenticity and non-repudiation. Let's break those down.
Authenticity is the process of proving genuineness. When a server downloads a critical firmware update, how does it know the patch is actually from the vendor and not a piece of ransomware disguised as a patch?
Right. Or when an employee logs in, how do we know it is actually the employee and not a script utilizing stolen credentials?
Exactly. Authenticity validates the origin.
And then we have non-repudiation, which sounds like legal jargon, but is perhaps the most critical pillar for post-incident investigations.
Non-repudiation establishes undeniable proof of an action, to the extent that neither party can later deny their involvement. The source material uses a brilliant, simplified analogy.
The cookie jar analogy.
Yes. Imagine a 3-year-old child standing next to a shattered cookie jar with chocolate smeared all over their face and hands. The child vehemently denies eating the cookie.
It wasn't me.
Right. But the chocolate is the immutable proof. The child cannot repudiate, they cannot deny the action, despite what they claim, because the physical evidence ties them to the event.
In a digital context, non-repudiation provides those digital crumbs. Through mechanisms like cryptographic digital signatures and append-only immutable audit logs, we can prove mathematically exactly which user account authorized a multi-million-dollar wire transfer.
It prevents a malicious insider from later claiming, "I didn't do that, my account must have been hacked."
To protect these 5 pillars, we have to constantly manage the threats against them. And that brings us to the quantitative and qualitative mechanisms of risk management. This is where the executive mindset truly dominates. We have to justify our existence with mathematics.
Risk management is the continuous process of identifying factors that could damage your assets, evaluating the potential financial devastation of that damage, and implementing safeguards that are strictly cost-effective.
You never spend $2 million to protect a $10 asset.
Exactly. We evaluate this risk through 2 primary lenses: qualitative and
Right.
quantitative.
Qualitative is the subjective, scenario-based approach.
Yes. You rank threats on a conceptual scale, like high, medium, low, or a traffic light system of red, yellow, green. You aren't utilizing exact dollar figures here.
But it's more about feelings and concepts.
Qualitative risk analysis is incredibly valuable for board-level reporting because executives often just need to understand the conceptual threat landscape. They want to know, Are we currently operating in the red for ransomware risk? They do not want to parse a complex 50-column spreadsheet during a quarterly briefing.
But when it comes time to actually purchase a cybersecurity insurance policy, or you need to pry budget out of the CFO's hands to buy a new suite of firewalls, a red traffic light isn't going to cut it.
No, it won't.
You need hard numbers. You need quantitative risk analysis.
Quantitative focuses entirely on hard financial values and historical percentages. And this introduces a specific set of mathematical formulas that are absolutely mandatory for passing management exams and functioning as a CISO.
Okay, let's do some math.
It begins with establishing the SLE, the single loss expectancy.
The SLE calculates exactly how much capital we bleed if a specific threat event happens exactly one time.
Correct. The formula for SLE is the asset value, or AV, multiplied by the exposure factor, the EF. Let's construct a scenario. Imagine your organization operates a specialized data center facility, housing servers, and switching equipment valued at exactly $1 million. That $1 million is your asset value.
Okay, so AV is $1 million. Now we have to analyze a specific threat against that asset. Let's say the data center is located near a river, and we are analyzing the threat of a localized flood. If the river breaches, it won't destroy the entire concrete building, but the water will rise high enough to destroy the servers located on the bottom 3 racks of the facility.
Right. And based on engineering estimates, you determine that a flood will destroy exactly 30% of the asset's total value. That 30% is your exposure factor. It is the percentage of loss realized by the specific threat.
So we take the asset value of $1 million, multiply it by the exposure factor of 30%, and our single loss expectancy, our SLE, is $300,000. Every single time that river floods, we lose $300 grand.
The math is pristine. However, a flood does not happen every Tuesday.
Good point.
To construct a justifiable annual budget, we have to contextualize that loss over time. We need the ALE, the annualized loss expectancy. The formula for the ALE is the SLE multiplied by the annualized rate of occurrence, or the ARO.
The ARO is a probability metric, right?
Mm.
It asks, based on historical data, how often do we expect this specific flood to occur in any given 12-month period?
Exactly. Let's assume you consult historical meteorological data, and it reveals that a flood of this specific magnitude happens, on average, once every 10 years. That means your annualized rate of occurrence is 0.1, representing a 10% probability in a single year.
Okay, so we take our SLE of $300,000, multiply it by our ARO of 0.1, and our annualized loss expectancy, our ALE, is $30,000.
That $30,000 ALE is the most important number in this entire process. It represents the mathematically probable yearly cost of that specific flood risk, and you utilize that $30,000 figure to perform a safeguard evaluation.
This is how you prove to the board that a security control is actually financially viable.
Yes.
So if a vendor approaches me and says, hey, we can install a state-of-the-art flood mitigation drainage system around your facility, and it will cost you $40,000 every single year in maintenance and leasing fees, I don't just guess if it's a good idea. I do the math.
The formula for evaluating a safeguard is the ALE before implementing the safeguard minus the ALE after implementing the safeguard minus the annualized cost of the safeguard itself.
Let's plug our numbers into that formula. Our current ALE before we buy the vendor's drainage system is $30,000. If we assume the drainage system works flawlessly and completely eliminates the flood risk, our new ALE after the safeguard is $0. So $30,000 minus 0 gives us $30,000 in savings. But the vendor is charging us $40,000 a year for the system.
So you take your $30,000 in savings, subtract the $40,000 cost of the safeguard, and you are left with a negative $10,000.
Negative $10,000.
The safeguard costs more than the annualized loss it is designed to prevent. A negative number indicates a terrible business decision. You would be burning $10,000 a year on protection you do not mathematically require. A strategic manager would immediately reject that control.
That is the bang for the buck philosophy, materialized through algebra. It just removes the emotion from security spending entirely. So if we reject the drainage system because it's too expensive, we still have to deal with the risk of the flood. What are our actual options?
A manager has 5 distinct avenues for handling risk. The first is to mitigate it, which means implementing cost-effective countermeasures to reduce the impact or likelihood.
So if the $40,000 drainage system was too expensive, maybe buying $5,000 worth of raised racks to lift the servers off the floor is a viable mitigation.
Yes, exactly. The second option is to transfer or assign the risk.
Which almost exclusively means purchasing an insurance policy, right? We pay a smaller, predictable premium to shift the catastrophic financial burden onto an insurance company.
Correct. The third option is to deter the risk. This involves implementing highly visible controls designed to convince a threat actor to look elsewhere.
Like putting up a massive fence with barbed wire and security cameras.
Hmm.
It doesn't physically stop a dedicated attacker, but it alters their psychological calculus.
It acts as a deterrent. The fourth option is to avoid the risk entirely.
Avoidance means choosing a completely different business activity. Like we realize the flood risk is too complex, so we just shut down the facility and move the servers to a data center on top of a mountain.
Avoidance is highly effective, sure, but often incredibly disruptive to the business. The final option, which we implicitly chose in our mathematical scenario when we rejected the expensive drainage system, is to accept the risk.
Accepting risk sounds like giving up.
It's the opposite of giving up. Acceptance is an active, documented management decision. It means executives have reviewed the quantitative analysis, acknowledged the threat, and formally determined that the cost of the countermeasures vastly outweighs the potential cost of the loss.
They consciously agree to absorb the financial hit if the flood occurs, because it makes the most business sense.
Precisely. To ensure that these risk decisions are legally defensible, organizations must rely on two legal concepts that sound frustratingly similar but operate in completely different spheres: due care and due diligence.
Oh, these two.
These terms trip up thousands of professionals.
What's the difference?
Due care is the proactive initial step. It involves taking the reasonable precautions that a prudent person would take to protect others from harm. Drafting and publishing a comprehensive security policy is an act of due care. You are formally stating your intention to operate securely.
Let's step away from technology for a second. Due care is like installing a massive "Beware of Dog" sign on the front gate of your property. You are taking a proactive, visible step to establish a standard of security and warn the public.
Yeah.
But the sign, on its own, does not physically stop a burglar from hopping the fence.
Which is precisely why due care is useless without due diligence. Due diligence is the reactive, continuous follow-up. It is the grueling, everyday enforcement, auditing, and verification that your mechanisms of due care are actually functioning.
So if due care is hanging the sign, due diligence is making sure you actually lock the gate every night and ensuring you feed the dog so it has the energy to chase the burglar.
Exactly. If an organization publishes a brilliant password policy, which is due care, but never bothers to audit the Active Directory to ensure users are actually following it, they lack due diligence.
And what happens if they get breached?
In a court of law, the failure to exercise both due care and due diligence is the literal definition of negligence. If you are found negligent after a breach, the organization is legally liable for the resulting harm.
You can have flawless risk math, robust policies, and massive guard dogs, but the most volatile variable in any security equation is the human being interacting with the system. Let's pivot to the human element, which encompasses personnel security from the moment of hire to long after they depart.
Security does not begin at the firewall. It begins in the Human Resources Department. It starts with how a job description is written, ensuring security responsibilities are clearly defined.
Setting the expectation early.
Yes. It continues through rigorous candidate screening, background checks, and the signing of non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, before the employee is ever granted network credentials.
The sources make a highly specific, testable distinction between the concepts of onboarding and offboarding.
Onboarding is much more than handing someone a laptop. It is the intentional process of socializing a new employee into the organization's unique security culture. It is teaching them the expectations. Offboarding is the abrupt, immediate revocation of their identity and privileges from the access management system the moment their employment terminates.
But the real danger isn't necessarily when someone joins or leaves. The hidden vulnerability is when an employee transfers internally. Let's say Alice moves from the HR department to a new role in the finance department.
Internal transfers are a massive source of systemic risk because organizations try to be efficient. The IT department will often just take Alice's existing HR account, add the new finance permissions to it, and send her on her way.
Which introduces privilege creep. Alice now has access to the confidential payroll data in finance, but she also retains access to all the sensitive disciplinary records from her time in HR, which she no longer needs to do her job.
Privilege creep destroys the principle of least privilege. To combat this, highly secure organizations treat an internal transfer as a full termination and a rehire from a systems perspective.
Oh, wow. A full teardown.
Yes, they completely disable and archive Alice's old HR digital identity.
Wow.
They then provision a brand new clean slate account for her, tailored strictly and exclusively to the access requirements of her new finance role. It is the only way to guarantee an auditable, secure baseline.
Speaking of auditing behavior, we need to discuss a personnel control that employees universally view as a benefit, but security teams use as a trap: mandatory vacations.
To the employee, it's paid time off. To the security architect, it's a highly rigorous, easily auditable control mechanism. By requiring an employee to take 1 to 2 consecutive weeks away from the office, during which all their network access is completely suspended, you create an environment where abuse, fraud, and negligence surface naturally.
The logic is that complex insider threats, like an ongoing embezzlement scheme or a sophisticated data exfiltration process, require constant daily maintenance by the insider to keep the plate spinning and hide the anomalies.
Exactly. The moment you force the malicious actor away from the keyboard and another cross-trained employee steps in to cover their duties, the hidden scheme rapidly unravels. The discrepancies become blindingly obvious to the replacement worker.
It's brilliant, really.
It is. Mandatory vacations also serve a dual purpose. They ruthlessly expose single points of failure in your personnel. If a critical legacy database crashes while the sole administrator is on their mandatory vacation and the rest of the team cannot restore it, you have identified a severe operational vulnerability.
We focused a lot on full-time employees, but modern organizations are flooded with people who aren't on the payroll. Contractors, third-party vendors, specialized consultants. They have physical access to the building and logical access to the network, but HR has very little visibility into them.
Contractors must be managed with a completely different, highly restrictive paradigm. From a logical perspective, they must have distinct, identifiable email addresses. It should clearly display something like contractor.name@company.com.
Why is that so important?
This visually signals to every full-time employee that they are communicating with an outsider, raising their natural level of caution regarding what data they share.
And from a physical security perspective.
You cannot rely on a busy project manager remembering to email security to deactivate a contractor's badge when a project ends. Contractors should be issued dynamically expiring badges.
Like they just stopped working.
Yeah, if a consultant is hired for a 48-hour engagement, the physical badge should chemically react and turn red or electronically self-revoke at the 48-hour mark. Access must terminate automatically by default.
We established in the very first segment that saving human life is the ultimate overriding rule. How does that philosophical rule translate into tangible personnel safety protocols at the corporate level?
It materializes through rigorous emergency management planning, hazardous materials training, and workplace violence prevention programs. But from an exam perspective, it often presents as a situational awareness scenario.
Like the fire in the server room again.
Yes, let's revisit the fire. The scenario will tempt you with millions of dollars of burning hardware. But your first procedural priority must always be triggering the alarm mechanisms and ensuring the evacuation of all human personnel. You do not deploy fire suppression systems if there is a risk of trapping employees inside.
We also have to consider safety when employees leave the controlled environment of the office.
Travel security is paramount, especially in a globalized economy. Employees traveling internationally must be extensively briefed. They need to understand local emergency infrastructure.
Like knowing the local 911.
Exactly. An American dialing 911 in Germany will not get help. They must be trained to dial 112. They must utilize corporate VPNs to shield data on hostile public networks. And crucially, they must be briefed on local laws regarding cryptography, as some nations actively outlaw the use of strong encryption.
There's also a fascinating, highly specific physical security control designed to balance extreme physical danger with system protection. The duress code.
Oh, that's a brilliant psychological and technical mechanism. Imagine a scenario where a database administrator is being physically coerced, perhaps held at gunpoint, in order to enter their PN code to unlock a highly sensitive server room.
Terrifying.
Let's say their normal daily PIN is 1379. They are trained that under extreme threat, they should enter a variant, such as 1375.
But if they enter the wrong code, doesn't the attacker get violent?
That is the genius of the duress code. Entering 1375 actually unlocks the door and grants access.
Oh, I see.
Yes, this immediately de-escalates the physical tension and keeps the attacker calm, protecting the employee's life. However, the system simultaneously and silently triggers a massive alert to the Security Operations Center and local law enforcement, indicating that the facility has been breached by an employee acting under severe duress. It prioritizes the life of the employee while immediately initiating an incident response.
Physical coercion is terrifying, but statistically, it is incredibly rare. The far more common insider threat is the employee sitting at their desk doing something they shouldn't. How do we monitor thousands of employees without physically standing over their shoulders?
We deploy complex analytical engines known as UBA and UEBA, user behavior analytics and user and entity behavior analytics.
What makes them different from normal alarms?
These are not simple rule-based alarms. These systems ingest massive amounts of data to establish a mathematical baseline of normal daily activity for every single user and device on the network. They learn what time you log in, what specific file shares you typically access, and the average volume of data you download.
So they establish a behavioral fingerprint for me. And if I deviate from that fingerprint?
The system throws a high-priority alert. If a marketing employee, who normally works 9 to 5 and accesses creative assets, suddenly logs in at 3 a.m. on a Sunday from an IP address in Eastern Europe and attempts to download the entire encrypted customer database.
The UEBA system catches it?
Exactly. It recognizes that catastrophic deviation instantly. It can automatically suspend the account before the exfiltration completes.
I think we often fall into the trap of picturing the insider threat as a malicious corporate spy trying to steal secrets. But the reality, according to the data, is much more mundane and arguably more dangerous.
The vast majority of insider threats are not malicious spies. They are well-meaning, exhausted, or distracted employees who make an accidental error. They misconfigure a database to be public, they accidentally delete a critical directory, or they fall victim to a sophisticated scam simply because the organization failed to provide them with adequate support and education.
Which means we cannot just monitor them. We have to actively upgrade them. We have to modify human behavior. But in the corporate world, there is a massive, highly testable distinction between making someone aware of a threat and actually educating them.
The industry relies on a trifecta of behavior modification: awareness, training, and education. People use these terms interchangeably in casual conversation, but in a management framework, they are entirely distinct tiers of development.
Let's start with awareness.
Awareness is the foundational layer. Its sole, primary purpose is to focus attention, modify immediate behavior, and increase general vigilance. It does not teach a complex skill.
So an awareness campaign is putting a poster in the break room that says, "Don't hold the door open for strangers," or enforcing a screensaver that reminds people not to share passwords. It's just telling someone, hey, the stove is hot, be careful.
Precisely. It creates a baseline of accountability. The next tier is training. Training is highly specific and functional. It teaches a relevant, hands-on skill required to perform a specific work task safely and securely.
Going back to the analogy, if awareness is telling them the stove is hot, training is putting them in the kitchen and showing them exactly how to use the oven to bake a cake without burning the facility down. It's teaching an HR rep the specific sequence of clicks to encrypt a tax document before emailing it.
Exactly. And the highest, most valuable tier is education. Education transcends the immediate technical task. It integrates diverse skills into a common body of knowledge designed to produce vision, leadership, and proactive problem solving.
Like what we're doing here.
Yes, education is what you are doing right now by listening to this deep dive. It is preparing for a CISSP certification or studying the psychological motivations of threat actors so you can design better security architecture.
So education is sending that person to a 4-year culinary institute so they can design the entire menu, manage the supply chain, and run the restaurant.
That is a perfect escalation of the analogy, and we desperately need that foundational awareness layer because human beings remain the absolute softest target for social engineering.
Go social engineering.
Social engineering completely bypasses firewalls and encryption by exploiting human nature. Our innate desire to be helpful, our deference to authority, our fear of getting in trouble, or our vulnerability to manufactured urgency.
We have to differentiate the specific types of attacks, though. Phishing is the classic approach, right? Casting a massive generic net with a fake email, hoping anyone clicks.
Yes. And then spear phishing is highly targeted at a specific individual, using details gleaned from their social media. Whaling targets the apex predators, the CEO, the CFO, the high-value executives. But the sources highlight business email compromise, or BEC, as arguably the most financially devastating vector.
The executive phishing scam is a terrifyingly effective manifestation of BEC. Imagine a mid-level employee in the finance department receives an email. The email address is spoofed to look exactly like the CEO's personal address.
And it creates immediate panic.
The message says, "I am currently traveling in Asia. I am about to step onto a flight and cannot be reached by phone. I just closed a massive confidential acquisition, but we need to wire $100,000 to this specific overseas account in the next 20 minutes to secure the deal. If you do not do this immediately, the deal collapses and heads will roll."
It is a masterclass in psychological manipulation. It leverages the authority of the CEO, the fear of causing a massive corporate failure, and a manufactured sense of extreme urgency to prevent the employee from thinking rationally.
The finance employee doesn't want to be the one who blows the deal of the decade, so they panic, they bypass the required two-person authorization rule, and they execute the wire transfer.
And within seconds, that money's gone, laundered through a dozen international accounts. You do not solve a business email compromise with a better firewall. You solve it through culture and awareness.
How so?
You must establish an organizational culture where that mid-level finance employee feels completely empowered and psychologically safe to hit pause, pick up the phone, and verify that request through a secondary trusted channel without any fear of intimidation or retaliation from management.
To build that kind of resilient culture, management has to actually put the rules and expectations in writing. We have to codify the culture. Which brings us to the hierarchy of policies and frameworks. It is structured like a pyramid, starting at the very top with the high-level policy.
The high-level policy, or the Enterprise Information Security Policy, is a broad, non-technical document authored and signed by senior management. It acts as a mission statement. It declares, "We value customer privacy and will protect our data assets." It is intentionally vague because it almost never changes.
Right. If the CEO included technical details in the overarching policy, they would have to convene the board of directors and rewrite the policy every time the IT department bought a new brand of router.
Exactly. Beneath that overarching umbrella, you have functional policies or issue-specific policies. These address a specific operational topic, such as a bring your own device or BYOD policy, an acceptable use policy, or a remote access policy. They provide more detail but remain relatively independent of specific technologies.
But policies are essentially just words on paper. A policy telling employees to be secure is meaningless without enforcement mechanisms. How do you give these policies teeth?
You support the policies with 4 highly distinct operational documents: standards, procedures, baselines, and guidelines. Understanding the difference between these 4 is critical.
Let's run through them.
Standards are mandatory, compulsory rules. They dictate specific requirements, such as all corporate laptops must utilize AES 256-bit encryption. There is no flexibility. You follow the standard or you are in violation.
Got it. Procedures are the instructions.
Yes. Procedures are granular, step-by-step, repeatable instructions detailing exactly how to accomplish a task and meet the standard. Step 1. Open the disk utility software. Step 2. Select the primary drive. Step 3. Enter the administrative password. Step 4. Click Encrypt. Procedures ensure consistency regardless of who performs the task.
Which brings us to baselines. Baseline feels similar to a standard, but it serves a very specific architectural purpose.
A baseline is the defined minimum secure configuration for a specific system or platform. Think of it as a master image. When you deploy a new Windows server, you don't install it out of the box. You apply the corporate baseline, which automatically disables unnecessary services, configures the required firewall ports, and sets the password complexity requirements. Baselines prevent configuration drift over time.
And the final document type stands alone because it is the only one that lacks authority. Guidelines.
Guidelines are the only optional documents in the hierarchy. They are highly recommended advice, best practices, and suggestions designed to help users navigate situations where a strict standard might not apply. They are meant to guide decision-making, not force compliance.
Once our internal house is in order, our policies are written, our baselines are established, and our humans are trained to resist manipulation, we are inevitably forced to interact with the outside world. We do business globally. And that means navigating a terrifying, constantly shifting minefield of international laws, regulatory frameworks, and cybercrime.
As a security manager, ignorance of the law is never a valid defense. You must understand the regulatory environment in which you operate. And right now, the most heavily scrutinized and aggressively enforced area of law revolves around privacy and data protection.
We hear the acronyms constantly. GDPR in Europe, CCPA in California. But what do they actually demand of us?
The General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, implemented by the European Union, fundamentally shifted the global paradigm of privacy. It is a mandatory regulation with devastating financial penalties for noncompliance, not merely a set of suggestions. To understand these laws, you first have to understand the specific asset they are designed to protect. You have to differentiate between PI and PII.
Personal information PI versus personally identifiable information PII. It sounds like we're splitting linguistic hairs. Is there a functional difference?
In the eyes of the law, the distinction is massive. PI, personal information, is a much broader term predominantly used in frameworks like GDPR. It encompasses any information relating to an identified or identifiable natural person. It could be an IP address, a cookie identifier, or a geolocation tag. If it can be linked back to a human, it is PI.
And PI?
PII, often utilized in United States legislation, is traditionally narrower. It typically requires a combination of specific data points, like a first and last name combined with a social security number or a driver's license number, to legally establish identity and trigger breach notification laws.
Regardless of whether a specific jurisdiction calls it PI or PII, these modern frameworks grant individuals immense, legally enforceable power over their own digital footprints.
They establish fundamental privacy rights. The right to know exactly what specific data elements an organization has collected about you. The right to opt out of having your data sold or processed by third parties. And perhaps the most technically challenging mandate, the right to be forgotten.
The right to be forgotten. From a technical perspective, that sounds like a nightmare. If I invoke that right, does a massive corporation have to physically locate every backup tape in every vault and scrub my name off the magnetic tape?
In practical applications, scrubbing immutable backups is nearly impossible and risks destroying the integrity of the entire dataset. What the right to be forgotten usually requires is the deletion of the active pointers and identifying links in the primary databases.
So you hide it, basically.
You effectively anonymize the data. The record of the transaction might still exist for financial auditing purposes, but the connective tissue linking that transaction to your specific identity is permanently severed. The activity can never be associated back to you as a natural person.
If an organization fails to protect that personal data, they are dealing with a security incident. But the sources are very clear that we must differentiate between a cybercrime and a data breach. They are not synonymous.
It is a vital distinction for legal reporting and incident response. A cybercrime is a scenario where the computer, the system, or the network itself is the actual target and victim of the attack.
Like a DDoS attack.
Yes. Think of a massive distributed denial of service attack that overwhelms a web server and takes an e-commerce site offline. Or a ransomware attack that maliciously encrypts a hospital's hard drives, rendering them unusable.
In those scenarios, the system is broken. The system is the victim.
Correct. A data breach, conversely, involves the unauthorized theft, viewing, or illegal copying of sensitive data. It is crucial to understand that during a data breach, the organization usually still possesses the original data.
Oh, that's interesting.
The servers are perfectly fine, the databases are humming along, but the confidentiality of that data has been irrevocably ruined because an unauthorized party now possesses a copy of it.
And a data breach doesn't require a sophisticated nation-state hacker dropping zero-day exploits, does it? If an authorized internal employee, like a nurse, simply opens a celebrity's medical file out of morbid curiosity without a legitimate medical reason, that unauthorized viewing constitutes a legal data breach.
Absolutely. Unauthorized access by an authorized user is still a breach. Now, alongside protecting the privacy of their customers, organizations must aggressively protect their own competitive advantage, which means securing their intellectual property or IT.
IP generally falls into 4 distinct legal buckets: patents, trademarks, copyrights, and trade secrets. Let's make sure we clearly define the boundaries of each.
A patent protects a new, useful, and non-obvious invention or physical process. You must register the details publicly with the government, and in exchange, you are granted exclusive monopolistic rights to produce and sell that invention for a set period, typically 20 years.
Okay, that's patents. What about trademarks?
A trademark, on the other hand, protects brand identifiers. It protects the symbols, logos, specific brand colors, or even distinct audio chimes that consumers use to identify the source of a product.
So a patent protects the mechanics of a new engine, while a trademark protects the stylized logo stamped on the hood. What about copyright?
Copyright protects the tangible expression of an idea. It covers software source code, written books, architectural blueprints, music, and white papers. It prevents unauthorized duplication, distribution, or plagiarism of the work.
Right. And the fourth one?
But the fourth category is the most unique, the most fragile, and the most critical for security professionals to understand. the trade secret.
A trade secret isn't registered with any government office, is it?
No, because the act of registering it would make it a public record, destroying the secret. A trade secret is a hidden formula, a proprietary algorithmic model, a highly valuable customer list, or a unique manufacturing technique.
Like the recipe for a famous soda.
Exactly. The critical catch is that to legally defend a trade secret in a court of law if it is stolen, the organization must be able to mathematically and procedurally demonstrate that they took reasonable, aggressive, and continuous steps to protect its confidentiality.
Meaning, if the CEO stands up at an open industry conference and casually brags about the mechanics of their secret algorithm, or if the IT department leaves the formula on an unsecured public server, it instantly and permanently loses its legal status as a trade secret.
Yes, because the company failed to exercise due care in protecting it. If you don't treat it like a secret, the law won't protect it as one. So we have to lock down our data tightly. But we live in an interconnected global economy. Modern business requires us to move petabytes of data across international borders every single millisecond.
Which introduces the massive complexities of transborder data flow and export controls. The reality is, you cannot simply move data or the hardware processing that data anywhere in the world you want, whenever you want.
You are constrained by international law. In the United States, frameworks like the International Traffic in Arms Regulations, or ITAR, and the Export Administration Regulations, EUR, heavily restrict the export of what are called dual-use goods.
Dual use.
These are items, technologies, or data that have legitimate, everyday commercial value, but could also be readily adapted for military purposes by a hostile nation.
If I am trying to ship the physical schematics for a satellite guidance system to another country, obviously that falls under export restrictions.
Yeah.
But how does this obscure military law affect the everyday IT department?
The most common and dangerous IT trap involves strong cryptography. High-level encryption algorithms and the software that utilizes them are often classified as munitions under these export laws.
Your kid?
I'm serious. If you load a corporate laptop with military-grade, heavily restricted encryption software, and an executive flies with that laptop to an embargoed or restricted country, or if you simply email that cryptographic software across the border, you have committed a severe federal export violation.
I want to explore a very specific modern scenario with this. What does this web of transborder data law mean for cloud computing? Let's say I'm a CISO for a highly regulated US-based manufacturing company. I mandate that my massive cloud provider stores all of my proprietary data exclusively in data centers physically located within the United States.
Okay, perfectly normal.
However, the cloud provider utilizes a follow-the-sun support model to maintain 24/7 uptime, meaning when it is midnight in the U.S., their night shift database administrators are logging into my servers from support hubs located in Singapore and Eastern Europe. Am I accidentally breaking transborder data laws?
The short, terrifying answer is yes, you very well could be. From a strict legal and regulatory perspective, if a privileged administrator sitting in Singapore accesses, queries, and views sensitive data that physically resides on a hard drive in the United States, that remote access constitutes a legal export of that data to Singapore.
Even though the physical hard drive never moved an inch, the data never permanently left the U.S. facility.
It doesn't matter. The data was processed, rendered, and viewed on a screen in another sovereign jurisdiction. The data flowed across the border. This is precisely why service-level agreements, or SLAs, negotiated with cloud providers are arguably the most critical legal documents a security manager will ever sign.
You have to spell it all out.
You cannot simply hand your credit card to a cloud vendor and assume they will handle the legal complexities. You must contractually mandate, in writing, not only where your data is physically stored and backed up, but from which specific geographic locations their privileged personnel are legally permitted to access it.
The level of oversight, the sheer volume of variables a manager has to track, is staggering. We've covered an immense amount of ground today. Let's take a breath and synthesize this massive journey we've just been on.
We began by completely deconstructing the psychology required to conquer a 150-question adaptive exam, and by extension, the boardroom. We mapped out the tactical approach, reading the scenario first to establish a baseline, hunting for critical capitalized modifiers, and aggressively eliminating absolutes.
We anchored ourselves in the bang-for-the-buck philosophy, proving mathematically that the best solution is the one that encompasses the others and provides the most overarching business value. And we cemented the three absolute golden rules. Security must enable the business, security must align with executive strategy, And above all else, in every single scenario, saving human life is the ultimate priority.
We navigated the strict, prioritized ethical landscape of the ISC code, establishing that protecting society always supersedes obeying your employer. We mapped out the architecture of governance, utilizing the RCI matrix to eliminate ambiguity, and clearly separated the business-focused information owner who dictates the rules from the IT custodian who simply turns the wrenches.
We explored the expanded 5 pillars of security, confidentiality, integrity, availability, authenticity, and the undeniable proof of non-repudiation. We proved the value of safeguards using quantitative risk math, calculating the single loss expectancy and the annualized loss expectancy to determine if a control is actually worth the money or if we should just accept the risk.
We clearly differentiated the proactive intent of due care from the reactive, grueling enforcement of due diligence. We deeply explored the human element, detailing the necessity of clean slate employee transfers to prevent privilege creep and leveraging mandatory vacations as an unavoidable behavioral trap to detect fraud.
We recognize that the vast majority of insider threats are just exhausted or untrained employees, which is why we must elevate them through awareness, training, and education to combat the devastating psychological manipulation of business email compromise.
And finally, we navigated the complex, unforgiving web of global privacy laws, distinguishing between PI and PII, defining the critical difference between a cybercrime against a system and a data breach of confidentiality, exploring the fragility of trade secrets, and exposing the hidden export dangers of transborder data flows in modern cloud architecture.
It is a phenomenal, overwhelming amount of information. But if you are staring down that exam screen or you're standing at the head of a boardroom table about to make a multi-million-dollar decision, remind yourself to trust the process. Your study, your rigorous preparation, and your deliberate shift from a technical mindset to a strategic management mindset will pay off. When you're stuck, eliminate the absolutes, look for the umbrella that provides the best bang for the buck, and remember that saving a human life always wins.
It is entirely about elevating your perspective. You have successfully put down the wrench. You are no longer just fixing a broken component in the engine. You are utilizing governance, math, and ethics to ensure the entire vehicle crosses the finish line safely and profitably.
We have spent this entire deep dive talking about building robust walls, drafting rigid corporate policies, calculating risk down to the exact dollar, and utilizing analytics to audit human behavior, all designed to secure our organizations for today. But I want to leave you with a final forward-looking question to consider long after this conversation ends.
If the true, absolute golden rule of this entire profession is that security must act as a seamless enabler for the business mission,
Then you have to look critically at the architecture you're building right now and ask yourself, are the security controls I'm deploying today flexible enough to allow my company to take the bold, highly calculated risks it desperately needs to take to survive tomorrow? If your security perimeter is perfectly mathematically impenetrable, but the business goes bankrupt because your rigid policies prevented it from innovating in a new market, well, you still failed. Thank you for joining this deep dive. Keep analyzing the risks, keep questioning the absolutes, and keep learning.